The regular meeting of the Minneapolis Police Conduct Oversight Commission will now begin.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Cynthia Jackson. I am the chair of the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, and I'm going to call this meeting to order for August 10th, 2021. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by members of the City Council, and city staff is authorized under Minnesota statutes sections 13D.021 due to the declared local public health emergency. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Commissioner Abdi.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah.
Present.
Commissioner Crockett.
Here.
Commissioner McGuire.
Present.
Commissioner Pino.
Present.
Commissioner Sparks.
Present.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Absent.
Chair Jackson.
Present.
We have 7 members present. I'll let you know, Commissioner or Chair Jackson, in case you did not see the email, Commissioner Jacobson is also going to be absent this evening.
Yes. So let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. We'll next proceed to our agenda, a copy of which has been posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. The first motion is the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abdi.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Chair Jackson.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Okay, that motion carries. The agenda is adopted. Our next order is the acceptance of minutes from the meeting from July 13th, 2021. May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abdi.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Chair Jackson.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
That motion carries and minutes for the July meeting are accepted. Before we move on to public comments, Vice Chair Abdi has an announcement. Vice Chair Abdi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I just wanted to take this time to personally address the commission because I will regrettably have to step down from my position as commissioner and vice chair because I've accepted a role in the Ward 4 office as senior policy aide. I have learned so much from each and every one of you. I plan to continue to work with the PCOC and be a real champion to public safety as along with the community. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much, everyone.
Congratulations, Vice Chair Abdi. Very proud, very happy for you in this new role. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna cry, y'all. Thanks.
That's okay. Tears are allowed. The next order of business is the acceptance of public comments. I will open the floor and invite comments from the community. We will limit the public comment period to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. And please remember to press *6 to unmute your phone and state your name. With that said, are there any community members here tonight that would wish to address the commission? Well, this is unusual. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Are there any members of the community here on the line tonight that would like to address the commission?
Yes, I have a comment.
Oh, thank you. Can you state your name?
My name is Chuck Turchik. I live in Phillips. I want to thank Chair Jackson for bringing up at your last meeting the issue of how difficult it is for both commissioners and members of the public to get information from the Office of Police Conduct Review. This comment I've made to you in writing, but I think it should also be made as part of the audio of a Police Conduct Review Commission monthly meeting. So several months ago, I had noticed that the Police Conduct Review Panel members were instructed in an OPCR brochure to send to the OPCR Joint Supervisors any MPD policy recommendations that occurred to them as a result of hearing any particular case. So I asked the Joint Supervisors in writing whether that had ever happened, and if so, what was done with those policy recommendations. I asked this question via email on December 10th, 2020. January 5th, 2021, January 14th, January 22nd, January 29th, February 4th, February 11th, February 26th, that one incorrectly addressed to Director Wheeler and Commander Wheeler. March 12th, March 26th, April 21st, May 18th, that one only to Director Jafar. And June 14th, again only to Director Jafar, and which led Commissioner Sarah to send a June 15th email to both Director Jafar and Commander Wheeler asking the same question. I received no response, zilch, to any of those 13 separate emails sent over a period of 6 months. There were so many requests, I even miscounted them and thought there were only 12. I finally did get the information by making a formal data practices request of the city. The answer was there is no such data. The fact that making such a request was necessary is unconscionable for any city agency, and maybe more so for one involved in police oversight. So what happens to a civilian joint supervisor who shows such disrespect for the public? Why? A feckless and probably ignorant of what's going on executive committee, that's Mayor Fry, Council President Bender, Council Vice President Jenkins, and Council members Gordon and Johnson, promotes her to the temporary position of interim director of the whole Civil Rights Department. This refusal to answer a basic informational question from a resident of Minneapolis is in effect rewarded. Well, since the two joint supervisors make all of the important decisions jointly at several steps in the processing of every complaint, which requires knowing a lot of information about each and every case, I then asked in writing who was acting as the civilian joint supervisor, which seemed to me to be a fairly full-time job, while Ms. Jafar was the interim director of the whole department. And again, I didn't get a response, this time to only 3 such requests. I learned more quickly this time, but again, I was forced to make a data practices request, and another person made a similar data practices request to get this simple bit of information. Who was the civilian person making these important decisions on the vast majority of complaints that come to the OPCR? If the non-response to my question about policy recommendations coming from the review panelists was unconscionable, this non-response was unconscionable, ridiculous, and crazy. A response would have taken 2 minutes. I said it before and I'll say it again. Anyone who asks questions of this OPCR seems by that very act to be considered an enemy. If you commissioners are having similar problems, welcome to the club, a club that should not exist in any city with a functioning civilian oversight system. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your work, and thank you, Commissioner Abdi, for the work that you put in on this commission in the short time that you were on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much for those comments and for drawing attention to this, because we're all aware of how many emails you sent to the OPCR asking for your questions to be addressed. We're all aware of that. And I think we're all just as frustrated and disgusted with it as you are. Are there any other members of the community on the line tonight that would like to address the commission? Please remember to hit *6 to unmute and state your name. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds, commissioners, and then we'll move on. Okay, I want to thank our speaker for calling in and addressing the commission tonight with their comments. We'll next take up Commissioner Sarah.
I wonder if I could just respond briefly to Mr. Turcic's comments, if that'd be okay, Chair Jackson.
Yes,
Um, I just want to let this group know that I also asked who are the joint supervisors, and I asked that last year in 2020 when I had just begun and I was new and I was just trying to understand the landscape. And at that time, no one from the OPCR or city staff would even respond to that email, even to me as a commissioner. And I was simply trying to understand who are the commissioner, you know, who do I need to work with, who do I need to communicate with, and that kind of thing. So it is really a problem, and it's blocking our access just to do very basic tests and just to understand who we're working with. And when Mr. Turcic was asking questions about has the review panel ever provided recommendations to the PCOC, I wanted to know that information too, because I think review panelists would be in a very good position to identify a specific issue and let us know about it. And if that information existed, I really want to hear it. So if it doesn't, that's fine. But I had a personal interest in understanding that as well. So I just wanted to commend Mr. Turcic for bringing this up and to being so persistent, and to just share that that's a concern of mine as well.
thank you. And mine as well. Any other commissioners like to respond to Mr. Turcic's comment? Okay, so we'll next take up the reports. I recognize Commissioner Pinot, who will present the audit subcommittee report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The audit subcommittee met on July 26th. We had a relatively short but eventful meeting. First of which was regards to our no-knock warrants. We had a draft research paper that was put together by our staff regarding the scope and goals of a potential study. The document that I'm going to be putting in the chat right now for public record can be found within the agenda of the subcommittee dated the 26th for the people who are following online. But for those members who are interested, that draft is now in the chat for you. I will also say that's the original copy of the draft. Our subcommittee did expand on those goals to talk about the impact, financial impact to the city, as well as potential costs to property owners upon a no-knock entry. Those are the two major additions to the goals that were listed there. In terms of coaching, the other topic that has been referred to our subcommittee, we talked with the staff as well regarding a dashboard that has already been created prior to all of us being on this commission regarding coaching data, and it has not been updated. Some of you may have heard about this when we had that presentation about coaching. We want to make sure that that's updated, and that way we get a more aggregate, up-to-date picture of what's going on before we start having a conversation about the alignment of coaching policy versus practice. So it is, the wheels are moving, although slowly, and we're looking forward to seeing at least some version of that updated dashboard from staff on our next meeting next week. And that is all I have to share about the workings of the audit committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinot. Do we have any questions, comments from the commissioners? We're all
Great.
good?
Yep.
Okay, great job, Commissioner Pinot. With that, without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report. I next recognize Commissioner Sarah, who will present the audit subcommittee report.
Thank you. The PNP, Policy and Procedure Subcommittee, also had a very brief but I think productive meeting. We had one guest speaker, Professor Rachel Moran, who's a law professor here at the University of St. Thomas Law School. And her area of scholarship is police oversight, police accountability, and access to government data. So really kind of right within the wheelhouse of what we're working on. And her scholarship is national in scope. So she was able to provide us like a really interesting perspective that we don't, like in the commission, I think we're always looking at Minneapolis and what our internal policies say. And she was able to kind of let us know what exists in other states, other cities, other jurisdictions. It was really helpful. And specifically what she was speaking of at this meeting was Council Member Gordon's proposed framework for changing the existing oversight ordinance and what that might look like in the future. And she did make some recommendations. I have some notes here. Her comments were brief, but basically she said that there's a few things that she thinks are very essential to effective oversight, and she recommends that we fight for those things. She thinks it's very important for us or the commission or whatever it's called to receive complaints directly so that individuals don't have to go through a police officer or through the precinct to do it. So that exists under OPCR today, and she thinks that's really important. She emphasized very strongly that we need subpoena power and witness power, meaning the ability to interview witnesses, which necessitates paid staff to do investigations. So that exists today. There are paid investigators within the OPCR and intake staff and all of that. But what does not exist today is subpoena power and witness power for the commission. And even for the OPCR, as I understand it, it's not quite subpoena power. So this would be an enhancement to the existing ordinance that she feels is absolutely essential. And I personally agree with that. She emphasized that we need to be independent of law enforcement, and that any law enforcement individuals who would either participate or be affiliated with the commission would give advice but would not be decision makers. And that would be one way of including perspective, but not, but maintaining a level of independence. She recommended that the Oversight Commission have disciplinary power, but she understands the state of Minnesota law as it exists today, and without a change to state law, that's just not available to us. So in the alternative to changing state law, which we can't do, she recommends that there's a mechanism for us or the panel to recommend discipline. And if the chief departs from that recommendation, then the chief would have to explain in writing why there's a departure or a discrepancy or what have you. So if the review panel recommended a B-level reprimand and the chief elected not to do that, to do an A-level, whatever, then the chief would have to say, I believe there's mitigating circumstances or what have you, and that's why. She recommended, recommended regular public reports from this body, from the PCOC or whatever exists moving forward. And I think that's actually a great idea. I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to be the one to do it, but I think it's a great idea. One thing she said is no Minneapolis police officers can sit on the panel or the selection committee or choose who sits on this commission or the review panel. So that would have to be a change because today Minneapolis police officers do participate in selecting and interviewing commissioners. She suggested that public groups be included in the commission. She thought one way that could happen is that there would be one seat or one commissioner reserved for a select organization. So for example, CUAPB, Communities United Against Police Brutality, they're very active. That group comes to mind. Perhaps council would elect to have a seat on this commission for the CUAPB, and whoever might come through them. It doesn't have to be the CUAPB. She didn't say a group. She just said certain community partners that the council would think are important, and that way they could always be giving us input and always be tying us to community action and community concerns. And finally, she said, if the chief departs regularly from your recommendations, that this should be documented, and it should be limited. So the chief shouldn't be allowed to just depart every single time. You know, there should be some like pushback against that. And one thing I personally brought up, so this is not the professor, but me, the professor provided us a copy of the law that's being passed in Maryland. And one provision of the Maryland law said that the chief can issue discipline different than what the civilian panel recommends, but the chief can only do something, excuse me, not the panel. The chief can recommend discipline different than what the discipline matrix calls for, but the chief can only do a higher level of discipline, not lower. So let's say there's a complaint again about excessive force, and it was sustained, and under the matrix, the range is C through D. And either the joint supervisors or the lieutenant or whomever recommended a C level, whatever, suspension. The chief could only give a C or a D level suspension. The chief in that circumstance could not offer an A level coaching or a B level reprimand. It would have to be the recommended level or higher. So in that way, we would be compliant with existing state law. The chief would still maintain plenty of control and input because the chief, of course, develops the discipline matrix and makes decisions about what's on it and what the levels are and what that should be. But this is a way of holding the chief to that matrix and saying, you know, these are the decisions we want as a community, and we want to see you do this. So that was Professor Moran's presentation. And Councilmember Gordon was also present, and he was also taking a lot of notes, and he had his own questions. So I just like to say that I really appreciate Councilmember Gordon's engagement and support of the commission. And he said several times how important it was for this commission to do this work and, you know, gather community input and invite public comment. And so I just felt really good about that. And it's nice to have council be so engaged with us. So that was the good stuff. Oh, another good thing is Commissioner Sylvester gave us an update. After our presentation a couple months ago from Director Michelle Rivero on immigration law and new American concerns, he took that information and he met with her personally, and he was able to create a working group within HCMC where he's employed. And together they formed a partnership to work with new Americans and immigrants and help them understand our emergency response system and our medical system, so that they were calling 911 when they needed it, but not calling 911 when, like, that's not what the situation recommended. You know, some people didn't call 911, they didn't know it existed, and some people called 911 to like refill their prescription. So like there was a lot of confusion. So that was a huge win, and I wanted to share it with this group because like the impact will be felt immediately, and it's really just the result of having these open conversations and inviting community speakers and having, you know, a city leader, Director Rivero, partner with us and provide us information and help us bring this out into the community. So that was another really great thing that happened. We also had on our agenda to speak about arbitration and misdemeanor arrests. Both of those items required data from the city, and this commission voted as a whole, you know, to direct the city to provide that information to our subcommittee, and we still don't have it. We still don't have the arbitration decisions where the city's position was overturned, and we don't have any information at all from MPD about misdemeanor arrests or citations. The city attorney has been at least responsive and saying they gave us 3 out of the 10 decisions, and apparently the other 7 are forthcoming, but it's been radio silence from MPD. So that's frustrating. It's continued to the agenda for next month. I really hope we have the information, but that's only 2 weeks away. So if we don't get it, you know, soon, it's going to be really hard to analyze that in time to have a meaningful conversation. So that's the update on those 2 points. And that concludes my remarks for this meeting.
Okay, there we go. That sounded like it was a fascinating, productive, very enlightening subcommittee meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Sarah, for having those guests and getting all that information and suggestions for us. I am all in. However, because I don't know either, I wouldn't mind being the one doing it, but I wouldn't know how. But everything that she brought to the table, I would be in favor of the Minneapolis PCOC implementing. I just wanted to ask a question. I think I already know the answer, but nothing beats failure but a try. How did the Minneapolis PCOC compare with the other jurisdictions that she had data for?
She didn't go super much into a comparison. She said there's a full range across the nation, which, you know, makes sense. But she says our model, you know, she's being diplomatic, is really weak. We don't have subpoena power. We don't have witness power. We can't access data. We have police officers selecting the commissioners. I mean, there's just there's a lot of opportunities for growth. You know, there's but we have some really good stuff. You know, OPCR already exists. They already have paid investigators who write very thorough investigations and do some great work. So a lot of stuff is really good, and there's a lot of room to grow. And I wanted to say one more thing is I provided her a copy of the NACOL Code of Ethics, which is sort of like our guiding principles, and every remark and suggestion she had was in line with what NACOL recommends as well. So that was a relief to me that there, you know, there's kind of like dovetailing and there wasn't a conflict there.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments or questions for Commissioner Sarah? Commissioner Pinot?
I mean, since the chair mentioned that, you know, there could be a comparison, and Commissioner Sarah, you did say she kind of alluded to it, but we didn't explicitly have a direct, like, one-to-one comparison on particular policy issues. Would it be of interest to the commission to refer such a direction to the audit subcommittee, and we could have staff put together a NACO centered, along with the additional research that we got from this professor, one-to-one comparison between PCOC and OPCR's joint entity versus some of the comparison groups either listed as NACO entities or the ones that were listed during your presentation?
Well, I think the more information, the better, you know,
Yeah.
so that sounds good.
Would it be repetitive, I guess, because it sounds like, yes, like the answers have kind of been alluded to, but at the end of the day, when Chair Jackson asked, you said no, there isn't a direct comparison. So that's the whole reason why I'm speaking. If the answer truly is a no, we could have that be some of our work.
You know, respectfully, I think it might be repetitive, just because even if she were to, like, or you were to draw out, like, well, Chicago does this and Boston does this, kind of what we want are the recommendations of what works.
Yeah.
Which is what she presented, and Councilmember Gordon was there to take notes and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. Just I thought I'd offer, and if there was a knowledge gap that needed to be closed,
Yeah.
more than happy to jump in. But if it's not there, then let's not force it to be there.
Just real quick, before I call on you, Vice Chair Abdi, I would very much be interested in having that information. I don't necessarily see it as being repetitive because we don't have a fully developed idea of that. We have some nuance, but not really the information. So we'll return to that. Vice Chair Abdi, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that presentation and just like lift up the sense of urgency around everything that we're talking about right now. I think it was a really cool, good way to just kind of humble ourselves because I think it could feel daunting when we can't do anything, but rather focusing on what we can do. And she was able to just give us 10 things that we could focus on. So it gave me a sense of hope of like, okay, there's things that we can do to push these things forward. And yeah, I thought it was a really great presentation and something that to definitely consider for sure.
Yeah, I just want to say good work, Commissioner Sarah. Good work. Like that, we're getting to the meats and potatoes of this. Commissioner Pinot.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. Looking at your marked agenda, Commissioner Sarah, those 3 attached documents in the line item that we're talking about that's the exhaustive list of additional information that I would need to do if to look at, or are there other documents that are not publicly available yet on this topic?
On Professor Moran's recommendations,
Yeah, I just want to dig into it and see,
that's everything.
Okay,
That's
cool. Thank you.
And her verbal remarks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted,
Yeah.
yep, go ahead, Chair Jackson.
Oh, Commissioner McGuire. I was just getting ready to call you.
Well, this might be in the documents that Commissioner Pinot was just referencing, but it sounds like so far one of those recommendations might be restricted by state law, but do we already have a good sense of like things we could take action on now? It seems like we're all so far pretty amenable to doing what we can. So do we have a good idea of like how we might be able to, or did she give us, I guess, an idea of how we might be able to approach some of these more immediately if we're trying to do anything shorter term?
She, to the extent that we don't have these things like subpoena
Mhm.
power, my understanding of Minneapolis law is that would probably require a change to the ordinance, which is what Councilmember Gordon is working on. It might be able to be accomplished with a staff directive, but obviously an ordinance change would be stronger. And then it would also have to be backed up by funding. I mean, she did say that, like, this would have to be funded. If you need to have investigators, you have to hire and pay investigators. So that, that's something that we would have to take up with council, presumably.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, with that, without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report. The next order of business is our discussion item. At last month's meeting, we received a high-level presentation by OPCR investigators, Britta Momanil and Christopher Band, regarding a proposed new process for reviewing case summaries. At that time, we approved the general direction of the work and asked staff to bring us a more detailed proposal. I'll now ask Britta Momani, to present that work.
Yes, hello everyone.
Hi.
As Chair Jackson said, we were here last month and we got to kind of walk through the very high level proposed case summary process. So I am back again with Christopher Band and then also one of our body camera analysts, Nick Barkley, and we're going to walk through the specific case summary process and then also provide an example of what a case summary would look like. So I'm just gonna jump right into what the proposed process would be. So it would include detailed case summary. Oh, and before I continue, can you all see the OPCR public case summary proposal document? Is that brought up?
It's not up.
I
Lisa?
am getting that shared right now.
Okay, I'll wait on that then before I continue.
I'm sorry I butchered your name.
That is totally fine.
Don't have my glasses on and couldn't see that that was an I at the end. I apologize. Okay. There we go.
Yes,
Can
that
everyone
is.
see this? Okay,
Great. So I'm just going to walk through this document and then we'll get on to the specific case summary example. But the proposed case summary process is going to include detailed case summaries for 5 randomly selected cases, and those will be representative cases. And then the commission would be reviewing a total of 60 cases per year. So just very generally, the new process relies on allegation categorization, randomization, and then representative sampling. And the goal here is to promote more transparency and also aid in the auditing and monitoring functions of the PCOC. So now I'm going to dive a little bit more into the specific methodology of the proposed process. So first, the population of complaints that's eligible for selection is going to be identified. And those complaints are going to come from the previous 365 days. So that will be the population universe. And then that specific date that they were drawn will be noted within the portal. So then in addition, the population will be broken down into categories, and these categories are based on the allegation type. So specifically, you can see that they include adequate protection, vehicle conduct, use of force, language and attitude, code of ethics, searches, harassment, discrimination, mental health, body cameras, and then other. And you can see under each of these bullet points, there are a couple different specific policies listed. That is a non-exhaustive list. Those are just examples of specific policies that would fit under each category. And then additionally, there'll be certain case outcomes that are excluded from the general population. So specifically, this will include cases that are duplicates, ones that are out of jurisdiction, closed by referral, or those that just failed to state a valid claim. Importantly, the categories will be calculated as a percentage of the total population of cases. And this is just to ensure that they are a representative sample within their population. So next, the cases will be randomly selected within their categories. So for example, cases in each category will be assigned a case category number. So that will be starting with 1 and then continuing on until all the cases in that category have been assigned. And then a random number generator will be used to select cases until there's a representative sample within each category. And then once the random selection of cases by category is completed, there's going to be a population of 60 cases. And those are the cases that will be actually summarized and presented to the commission. So this population will then be presented, or excuse me, will then be assigned a case selection number, starting with 1 and then once again continuing on to 60. And then these cases will be randomized into sets of 12 with 5 cases in each set. So this is just annotating what cases will be presented in what month. And then lastly, OPCR will publish the 5 selected case summaries on its website at the beginning of each month. And this is to allow members of the public to access these summaries as soon as possible. And this is to hopefully facilitate public input, questions, so people can review them ahead of the meetings. And then there was also going to be a quarterly review of trends. So a quarterly review of the cases that the commission has seen, because I know at our last meeting, one of the concerns was that identifying patterns is one of the major purposes. So the goal is that this quarterly review of trends by OPCR staff and PCOC members will have the opportunity to identify some of those trends and look back at the cases that have been presented. So I know that that is a lot of information and that's very specific methodology. So I'm just going to give a super high level quick walkthrough of the process one more time. So first, there's a general population of complaints from the last 365 days, and that's identified. Then the cases within that population are categorized according to the violation type. Then the categories are broken down into representative portions of the total population, and cases within each category are randomly selected until the entirety of the 60 is selected. Then lastly, the cases are combined into groups of 12 sets of 5, so that we can see which ones will be presented in what month. And then once that whole selection process is complete, OPCR will publish those case summaries on their website at the beginning of the month so that the public can review. And then there will be a quarterly review of the trends that we have seen within the cases that were presented. So that concludes the presentation of the overall process. And then, as I mentioned, now we'd like to kind of walk through what the case summary would actually look like, so you all can see exactly what type of information you would be presented with. And then, if possible, could we save questions until after you see what the case summary looks like? Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Britta,
yes.
could I just check that you can now see the case summary example?
I can see it, Lisa. Can everyone else see it? Perfect. All right, so you can see that right off the top, we have included a cover page that kind of clearly notes the allegations, the policies, and the outcomes in that table. And we also delineated OPCR, Police Conduct Review Panel, and MPD outcomes. So you can clearly see what action was taken at each level. And we figured that this chart format would be easier to digest if someone was just looking at the report quickly, and it would also help with identifying patterns and trends. So that's why we chose to include a cover page that had a table of allegations, policies, and outcomes. And then in the next section, we have included the summary of the complaint. And here you're going to see the specific conduct that the complainant is alleging is the violation. So you can take a look over that section and see what would be included there. Once again, like I said, it's just the conduct that the complainant is alleging would be the violation. And then after that, we move into the summary of investigation. And this section is just going to walk through the stages of the investigation in the same way that OPCR actually receives the complaint and investigates it. So it will go through intake, video review, case routing, and then the preliminary and administrative investigations. And then, of course, it will end with the case outcome. So now Nick, who, as I mentioned, is one of the video analysts, he is going to walk you all through the summary of investigation section, starting with the intake section.
Thank you, Britta, Chair Jackson, and the commission. Thanks for having me here today. This is our first meeting together, so it's nice to put names to faces, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future. As Britta was saying, the summary of investigation portion of this will start with the intake investigation. We would include information from what we call the BusyNet report, which is information from our computer-aided dispatch that MPD uses. We would like to list what the problem was so that we have an idea of what type of call officers were responding to or were involved in. In this particular case, which is merely an example that we created, the officer was involved in a traffic collision on his way to assisting another officer. And so we would put some notes in there about what was known at the time to the officer via dispatch. We would include any public sections of the police report that was written. In this particular instance, it says that while en route to assist another officer, a city-owned police vehicle crashed into another vehicle, causing damage to property. Again, this is just a basic public-facing information as to what would happen, or as to what happened. Other information that comes in during the intake process might be initial complainant statements. Our intake investigators might have to reach out to the complainant via telephone or email to confirm some of the information that was written in the original complaint. They might have to look at work schedules at MPD. They might have to look at the GPS data from specific squads. Or any other documents that might be needed to properly identify the focus officer. At the same time this is going on, our body analysts, or body worn camera analysts, will be reviewing to see if any footage exists from body worn camera or any other forms of video surveillance that we might be able to access. In this section, there would be again an indication of whether or not body-worn camera footage existed, and the work that analysts did during their initial investigation of the footage. So in this particular example, video analysts reviewed 30 minutes of video from an officer, which began recording after the crash occurred. And again, at the top of the example here, we have that cover page that lists the allegations that were made, and one of them was that they didn't properly activate their body-worn camera. And so that would be a note that the analyst would make during that process. If there was any squad video to be reviewed, we would also conduct that review at the time and provide any information that may have been available. Once all of that is packaged up, we present that to the joint supervisors at the joint supervisor meeting, which is part of the intake process that happens every week. Within that meeting, the joint supervisors are there, as well as members of OPCR staff, intake investigators, body-worn camera analysts, as well as administrative investigators from OPCR. All of them put their input into this meeting, but ultimately it's the joint supervisors who make the decision. And in this example, after reviewing the relevant data and evidence collected during intake, the supervisors agreed that the complaint warranted an administrative review or investigation, and per the complainant's request, it was assigned to a civilian investigator. And that's one point that I want to make sure that was highlighted in here, was that in the current model, citizens do have the opportunity to select whether they want a civilian investigator or a police investigator, and we do honor that request. So once the joint supervisor decision has been made to assign to a administrative investigator in OPCR, it is then assigned to an investigator. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Chris to talk about administrative and preliminary investigations.
So good to see everyone again. So for the admin investigation, or it can be a preliminary investigation, this is really information that is outside of MPD. So we get the statement from the complainant, those are recorded, and then transcripts are taken. Any witness statements, and this can include witness statements from witness officers, but also civilian witnesses, anyone we have information on who we can talk to that can provide insight into the case. In an admin investigation, we also take a statement from the focus officer. This is done under a decision called Garrity. That means it is compelled, but it cannot be used outside of this process. And then that would also include any additional evidence that we would gather from other sources. Medical documents would be an example if it's a use of force allegation, or jail records, text messages that prove certain conduct. Any other information that is available to us, third-party CCTV, and is held elsewhere. Once the administrative investigation is completed, everything gets packaged up to be sent on. That includes all the exhibits listed, as well as the actual report that is written out about what happened with the full incident, and then that is put forward. So that's kind of where we move on to the case outcomes, which are listed at the end here. So in this particular case, with a full administrative investigation, it then gets forwarded to the review panel. The review panel is made up of 2 sworn Minneapolis officers of I believe, rank of lieutenant or higher. Could be wrong on that, but it is higher ranks. And then 2 civilians. The review panel will decide on each of the allegations whether there is merit or no merit. When they have made their decisions, that is then forwarded to the chief's office to make the determination on discipline. So in this particular incident, the discipline was given with a suspension of 8 hours, just an example, but that would be an option that the chief could make on discipline. But it is that final part, it is the chief's decision under Minnesota state law, as was discussed earlier. Something else that I would like to go over, I have a screenshot of it here, but Lisa, that's going to be an issue to show. I can just talk about it.
If you can share it, feel free.
Okay. And of course, this is now the time it's not showing up. Sorry, give me 1 second here. So this, can you all see my screen?
Christopher, it's pretty small. Can you enlarge it at all?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so this is this portal is pretty much finished now, but the portal is to reflect the case summary at the beginning. So what we do is for the cases, it has the overarching subject, the main policy implicated, the OPCR outcome, any MPD outcome, and the review panel's findings. And we are going back to 2015, and it will list all those cases, and our intention is to continue this going forwards as new cases are added. When the portal is live, this link here will bring up the PDF of each case summary that's been done before, and we'll add that as well as the cases go forwards. And that is the end of our part of the presentation.
Commissioner Pino.
Well, thank you very much to our presenters. I do have a few questions, 3 in fact. First one is in relation to, and I'm sorry if you hear my dog talking to me while I am talking to the whole group. The first, not concern, but just question is in terms of your methodology, in terms of the categorization and like the randomness, in terms of like randomly selecting a particular infraction related to a particular category. I would assume that some of these, like the body worn camera infraction, is not going to have a big problem with randomization because you will have a lot of those policy infractions, right? But some of these other ones, you know, that don't have a lot of infractions that will happen throughout the course of, you know, a month when you know, redo this again and again, even if it's over a full year period. Do you have a concern about, you know, whether or not randomization is going to be effective there because of the really small sample size?
Who is your question addressed to, Commissioner Pino?
Whoever created the methodology for this.
Okay.
I can talk a little bit to that. So the
Mhm.
the categorizations are based on our case management system.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what they're broadly grouped into. And then by using a percentage from the whole pool, there shouldn't be an issue in getting the selection for each category.
Okay. That was definitely one of my other questions of like, you know, asking about the representation of those categories. So as long as you don't have a concern about that, and I guess the limited sample size thing may not be an issue. I guess the one thing that I am still kind of concerned about, in the last time we talked about this, I remember raising the point about wanting to have some level of demographic information in these case summaries, and I don't see any demographic information in this case summary. Did we ever come to a conclusion on whether or not that was shareable? And can we please try to get this shareable in those reports? Because it's really hard to measure disparate impact when you can't see the information around disparate impact.
Right.
I think that is something that we could look into.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have an answer for you right now.
Okay.
We would have to consult with our leadership in our team and you know, everyone else involved when it comes to complainants information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the rest of the group is, but I'm officially requesting. I would love to have all demographic information in every single one of these. I think it would bring some measure of value that we have never seen before to these, including that portal. It would be great to see a column of race, age group, gender, you know, a bunch of demographic information alongside each of these. And just to be clear, not demographic information of the complainant, although often that's one and the same person. The subject, primary subject engaged with police interaction. That would be the subject of that engagement. So it could be a family member who makes the complaint, but I don't care about the family member who makes the complaint. I care about the primary subject engaged in police activity that caused that.
Okay, so the subject of the police report is
Yes.
who you're talking about there.
I would.
Yep.
I would just add, Commissioner Pinot, I can answer or add a little bit to that. When we receive complaints, we don't always receive that information. And as demographics is not a requirement of submitting a complaint. And so there may be times where an anonymous person submits a complaint and we might not have demographics about the complainant per se, but we might have demographic information about who may have been arrested or who may have been involved. And so it would just take some time to sort out how we clarify to public facing information why certain demographics are included in certain cases and not included in others. And so
as far as like completeness in demographic information, totally understand. Sometimes that information isn't collected. And again, just want to reinforce, I have no care, don't mean to be crass about this, but I have no care about the demographic information of the complainant. I care about the subject of the police report. And I may be making an assumption here, but that is probably going to be more consistent than someone putting in their own information on a complaint, which is why I'm focused on it. And the only reason I ask this is because in other dashboards, that information is clearly coming from some sort of police report, and that information is, although aggregated, definitely publicly available. And I even demonstrated in our last meeting that you can render it down to a single individual that was involved in police use of force and their demographic information, and that's publicly possible to do. So either this is possible to do, or we're doing something wrong in our other dashboards that we ought not to be doing. And I just want consistency amongst those two things.
One thing I'll add just before we move on is that not all of the complaints that we receive have a police report or have body camera evidence along with them. So that would just be one barrier there to collecting total demographic information.
Vice Chair Abdi.
Thank you. So this is kind of me just thinking out loud, but about this process, what I'm understanding the difference is like it's a computer picking out the case files instead of us doing it personally. And please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm also seeing like there's missing the why and why the whole thing happened. And I feel like that's what we were missing before, of what was the explanation of the decision and why it happened in the first place. Not necessarily that it was like difficult to understand, but like we didn't have enough information to go off of. And there were certain sections where it specified what supplemental data you guys had or documents you had. Would the commission have access to that stuff, or are you just telling the commission that you have that access but aren't going to give it to up? If that makes sense. And also, what would it look like if we wanted to add that why of the decision? Because I think everybody would agree if that's what we want to know, of what was the meaning behind the decision, but I don't know if that's something that is capable of happening.
I believe that the actual substantive documents that are part of it would be private data, which I believe the city attorney has talked about before. But we could certainly look at the amount that could be added into the summaries for any decision making that those decisions are made outside of OCPR by the civilian review panel, or by the police conduct review panel. But so we could definitely look into what level of that decision making is available.
And I don't know if it's going to be like word for word what is used on that document, but I think there's some like towards the like case outcome, it just gave like a quick like couple word sentences on what the reasoning was. Is that what the kind of verbiage it would be, or is that just an example?
This is all just purely an example.
Okay.
We went looking for other examples that other agencies are doing that is similar to this. And the examples that we could find were rather lengthy. And so just for the purposes of this demonstration, we chose to use a very kind of simple case that didn't have a whole lot to be added. So I just would like to reiterate that all of this is an example. The examples in the summary proposal of categories are not exhaustive. They're just limited examples of what might fall into the category. So everything here is just an example.
Okay, I think I saw Commissioner McGuire's hand first.
Wanted to ask about the nature of the police reports. I'm more familiar with police reports when a civilian is charged with, some criminal, under a criminal statute, and sometimes the nature of what is public can change over time depending on where an investigation is. So I'm just want to put in a request. I don't know if this happens with the police reports used here, that we have the most recent version of whatever the public data is, because that can be very limited at certain points in an investigation. In some contexts, and can be expansive later and might have some of that information that we would want to see.
Commissioner Sarah.
Thank you. I have a couple suggestions and then also a question. So one suggestion is I support Commissioner Pino saying we need that demographic information. That's going to be absolutely essential. Another suggestion is including what the discipline matrix says. So I really like the way that you laid out, not the ordinance, but I guess the manual provision, like excessive force or body worn camera section or whatever. I think that's great. And then I think the next step would be discipline matrix range is B to C or A to D or no range in the matrix, or whatever, just so we kind of understand where it is in the matrix. And then whatever the chief's decision is, then we understand if the chief's decision was within the matrix or if it was a departure from the matrix, because that's kind of information that we would need to be looking at. Another suggestion I have, well, before I make another suggestion, I should have started by saying this is really great and it's 1 million times better than what we had before. So I would just like to say thank you so much for this. And it's obviously been very, I can tell how much thought and effort all of you have put into this. So my comments are, I hope in the best of faith, I'm with you. This is great. Let's make it as good as we can. So then my next suggestion is, since we're going to be doing this as an aggregate and you all will be putting this information together at the end of the year, or, like January from the preceding year, I think what we need also is a list of all the officers that have been disciplined and or coached and have had complaints against them, because what we're noticing is that some officers will have constant complaints, constant coaching, but not be improving their conduct. And that is something that we will want to check against. That would be private data. So that leads me to the question I have for the group, or I don't know who can answer this question, but at our last meeting, we asked the chair to engage counsel and the city attorney's office to see whether council intended for us to view private data. I think we need to know the answer to that question, because that's really gonna determine everything. This process, our policy, it just touches everything. So I think we need to understand if we are intended by the council to view private data, or I should say non-public.
Just clarification question, by council, do you mean city council and not like legal counsel?
I meant city council.
City council.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to just jump in right after Commissioner Sarah is if we couldn't get the police, like the law enforcement officers information, at least the precinct. So that's kind of just better than nothing to see like at least what kind of location, who's going to be targeted the most, if we can't know the officers specifically.
I would like to add something to that. If we could just, if it would make things simpler and more in line with the data privacy stipulation, we could just have like just number the officers, the number with the highest repeat complaints, then the number 2 officer with the next highest number. We don't necessarily need to know names because you guys know the name. You would have that information of who that officer is. And you don't necessarily need to share that with us, but I personally would like to see how many officers on the MPD are receiving repeated offenses and still on the force, and not correcting their behavior, as Commissioner Sarah said. I think that's absolutely doable and it doesn't violate any conditions of the Privacy Act. So that's another suggestion that I would make. And I did have one question. In the categories, one of them says no jurisdiction. If you could just give us an example of what a case that would fall into that category would look like. It's probably something really simple and I'm just not looking at it, but I'm a little
so
by that.
under the ordinance that created OPCR and kind of set up that process, the jurisdiction is purely sworn employees within the City of Minneapolis Police Department. So oftentimes there's joint operations, and that could be, a sheriff's deputy has a complaint against them, and then or Bloomington Police, or when other agencies operate within the city.
Yep, thank you. Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Let's see, Commissioner Sparks.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank our presenters. I thought this was a really great presentation. I really appreciated the samples. I really appreciated the time that you spent walking us through it. I can tell that a lot of thought and a lot of effort went into this. It was really impressive and a lot of good consideration for what we want to see, what the public deserves to see, and what we can do. So thank you for that. I really mean that. I don't have any of my own suggestions at this time, but I do want to, if it means anything to anyone, that I lend my voice to what Commissioner Pcoc was saying about the demographics and Commissioner Sarah about the discipline matrix and the coaching. I think that's hugely important to the work that we've been doing here. Those have been major roadblocks for us and major items of public concern. I don't think I can overstate how strongly the public concern is about those 3 items. And it'd be really good to try and find some kind of way to incorporate that. And I think it's very doable. My only other comment just in general is that what we've seen tonight with this is a huge, huge step forward. And I don't want to sell that short at all, because this is, in a lot of ways, everything we've been asking for. It's proceeding in the right direction so hugely. We are going to be able to, with this model, review more cases. We have more information. It'll be more data driven, and maybe most importantly, it's, a million times more accessible to the public, which is something that we've really been struggling with and really pushing for. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Pcoc, you have your hand raised.
Inadvertently, I apologize.
Okay, all right. Christopher.
I just wanted to draw your attention to something that was just going back to what was mentioned before about the officer information. There is a public dashboard that does have some officer information about complaints. If you go to, I can post the link in the chat, but I know that not everyone will be able to see that. But there is a police conduct review data dashboard that does have some officer information about the complaints.
So it will give us information about how many complaints a particular officer has received and if they are similar to prior complaints.
Yeah,
Because that's the
it does list out the complaints. So it doesn't break it down the way. So you mentioned that you like a list of how many officers are catching the most complaints. I think was my understanding. But you
yes.
can search officers in this database and see the list of complaints against them.
But then we'd have to know the officers though, like names individually, right?
Yeah, it isn't it isn't a chart that has a percentage of who has the most.
Okay, that's what we would like though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that.
Okay. Commissioner Sarah.
Thanks. And Mr. Band, I'm familiar with that dashboard, and there are some limitations with it. For example, if a complaint is sustained with coaching, it is reported on that dashboard as closed, no discipline. So when you're looking at that dashboard, it can be very confusing because it looks like the officer had a complaint that was closed, no discipline. One might think that it was not sustained, or there was no jurisdiction, or it was simply erroneous. But in fact, the case may possibly be that the complaint was sustained, that it was found to have happened, and that coaching was imposed. And it may be possibly, as with Derek Chauvin, that coaching was imposed multiple times for egregious conduct, for
Yes.
excessive force, over and over and over again. That's really what we need to know. And that dashboard, it just tells us that they've had a lot of complaints. It doesn't tell us what happened. It doesn't tell us if they've received coaching several times, because if they've received coaching several times, even if it's not for excessive force, even if it's for like whatever, body camera or whatever, I mean, it really seems like the coaching would not be working. Like that seems like the conduct is not changing. So that's really what we need to know, and that's why we're asking for all of this.
Yes, very well put. Attorney Fussy, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, I guess, piggyback on what Commissioner Sarah was saying. I certainly appreciate and understand that the coaching issue is important and or important to the commission. As you know, however, that issue is in pending litigation, and depending on the resolution of that litigation, that could very well affect what can and cannot be provided. And obviously, the city, depending on the resolution of that action, would be in compliance with how that comes up.
So let me understand this. You're saying that they cannot compile a list of the officers with the most complaints against them?
No, I'm just narrowly speaking to the classification of discipline. As you know, it's been the city's position that discipline does not equate to coaching.
Right.
So there's a narrow comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I was understanding you correctly. This has been a great presentation. I want to thank all three of you for the intensive work that you have put into this. I am very much looking forward to being able to use this tool that you have created and just made stupendously better for us. Does anyone else have any questions or any other comments? Okay, I've lost my place. Okay, with that and without objection, I'll direct the clerk to receive and file this presentation. And the next order of business is to consider adoption of the recommended process. But I think that we have made some additional suggestions. So maybe you guys will take a look at that and then come back to us again with some revisions before we adopt the actual process. Is the body in agreement with that? Okay. So do I need, I don't need to necessarily call a vote or ask for a motion for that, do I? Can we
I
just?
think it might be a good idea to just make a motion to postpone this to the next meeting to allow staff to make revisions based on the suggestions.
Okay, would a commissioner feel able to make that motion?
Do you want to take it, Abigail?
No, I don't.
Okay. I move that the commission direct staff to make conforming changes as laid out in our discussion on this agenda item.
Thank you, Commissioner Pino. May I have a second?
Commissioner Sarah seconds.
Okay, thank you. Oh my God. Lisa, may you please call the roll?
Commissioner Abdi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pino,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Chair Jackson.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Okay, that motion passes. So we will send, we'll direct you to look further into the suggestions that we made and come back at our September meeting. So thank you. And our next order of business is to consider a proposed amendment to PCOC Operating Rule 10 to allow the revised process. And I think that that would be getting ahead of ourselves at this point, wouldn't it? Right.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll table that item of business until September. And may I have a motion to table that?
Move to table.
Second,
Second.
vote.
Commissioner Abdi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pino,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Chair Jackson.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. With that, we've completed all the items on our agenda for this meeting. We hustled through this amazingly with all that information. I'm really surprised. It was just presented so well, I think. It was very engaging and very informative, and I just cannot express enough thanks that you are undertaking this task to improve our processes, that the PCOC is able to engage in the oversight that we should be, and in the ways that we should be, that make it effective. So I'll see everyone back here next month for September 14th regular meeting, and seeing no further business to come before us and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations again, Vice Chair Abdi, on your position.